Thanks to all of you for coming for this press conference. Some of you, perhaps over time, have become justifiably annoyed with my penchant to start a scrum or a news conference with a story or some sort of anecdote. So I'm mindful of that this morning, but I'm going to do it anyway. It's the caucus planning, summer planning session just before the 2007 election. We're at Jackfish near North Battleford. And there's an evening barbecue after a day's worth of planning and work, and I'm walking around eating and talking. Walking, eating, and talking. Not maybe the smartest thing to be doing, but that's what I was. For those people who know me well, they might not be surprised. And I started to choke, and it was pretty bad actually. I was worried, and I noticed that really none of the MLAs were doing anything about it, except for then candidate Darrell Hickey, who was a police officer, as you all know, and stood up and said, "Are you in trouble?" And just about then the problem resolved itself, so I was fine. But later that evening I was sitting with the MLAs and I said, you know, I was choking badly, very badly, and you guys sat there and did absolutely nothing. And Bob Benrod piped up right away and said, well, I was doing something. I was planning my leadership campaign. Well, I'm not sure if Bob Benrod is interested in running for the leadership of the party. He's probably listening in somewhere down in the Saltcoats area. But if he is, it would be time to get his campaign ready, and that would be true of any others, whether they're in the caucus or not, who are interested in becoming leader of the party, and then having the great honor of becoming Premier of Saskatchewan, because I'm announcing today that I'll be retiring from politics in Saskatchewan. I've talked to our party president and asked that he would begin the process of electing a new leader to replace me, and that this should happen forthwith. I'm sure they'll have announcements as to timing of that in the days ahead. I've also had the chance to talk with my constituency association in Swift Current. I've had this great honor since September 16th, 1999 of being the MLA for Swift Current, my hometown. And I've had a great group of folks down there, and so I've indicated to them that I'll also be stepping down as MLA upon the selection of a new leader for the party, and that and thanked them and indicated that there will be then the by-election there in the not-too-distant future, with, again, those timelines to be announced. I don't know exactly when I made the decision. Sometime around the end of June, Tammy and I have been talking a lot about this and deliberating about it. And it's a hard thing to just even start to talk about, really, just because of how all-encompassing and all-consuming the job can be. But we worked through things together, and right around sometime in the end of June, I just decided that, and we decided that now was the time for me to end my career in politics for a number of reasons. And I'll get into them perhaps at the end. But I will just say on that count now, I think renewal will be good for the province. I think renewal and a different perspective will be good for the government. And I think renewal will be good for my party as well. Whatever I do after this, and I currently have no leads or prospects, whatever I do after this, this job will be the honor of my working life. It has been just a great honor, a wonderful privilege to serve as Premier of Saskatchewan. So I'm grateful to the people of the province for allowing me that opportunity to serve. I am going to continue to serve as Premier, of course, until a new leader is chosen, and we've got some work to do. We're going to have a very active fall sitting. We had a great couple of days of planning as a caucus here just this week, and we have work to do. And if I may say, we have a strong foundation in Saskatchewan upon which to continue that work. It is easy to forget the questions we used to ask in this province just 10 years ago. We really did wonder, would we ever get to 1 million people and then stay over 1 million people? Could we ever add enough jobs to the economy as to affect a transformational or a structural change to the economy? And I know it takes way more than government to achieve any of those things. Maybe government's the smallest part of it, but government is a part of successful economic growth. Not only do we not talk about whether we can stay over 1 million people, we're closing in on 1.2 million people. And for many people in Saskatchewan just 10 years ago, that would have seemed impossible. And some said so publicly when we articulated population goals. There are 67,000 more jobs in Saskatchewan today than there were 10 years ago. We took over at the time, we took over with the worst job creation record in the country. And through these last 10 years, notwithstanding the challenges of recent years, but for this last 10 years, we can point to the second best job creation record in the country. And I say we not as a government, but as a province. I do think, though, that our growth plan that we ran on in 2007 and then again in 11 and again a year and a few months ago had something to do with the economic success, what has been, I think, transformational success. There have been other things I've been thinking about as I've come to this decision in advance of meeting with you all, or even recording the video that aired earlier. If someone would have told me, by the way, at the start of my term that, at the end of my time, that we would be 1.16 million people, that there would be 67,000 more jobs, that we would have gotten around to build a children's hospital and a psychiatric hospital and 40 brand new and replacement schools and new long-term care facilities, I might have doubted all of that. I would have taken any part of that as success as a part of a team. And I make that point, as a part of a team. But there's been other things as well, a record number of highway kilometers that have been repaired and rebuilt, record revenue sharing for municipalities, even with the changes that were made in the spring. We had the longest surgical wait list here in the birthplace of Medicare, the longest surgical wait list in all of Canada. That's what we took over. And because of our frontline workers, by the way, 750 more doctors now that we've hired, 3,000 more nurses that we've hired. And I think in part because of the innovation of private surgical clinics, we have among the shortest wait times for surgery in the country. And what about those who are most vulnerable? This has been really a decade of growth in terms of population and jobs and income and investment. What about those who are most vulnerable? Well, we dropped 110,000 plus from the tax rolls completely. We lowered income taxes, and there's 110,000 low-income people that don't pay provincial income tax at all anymore. It was the Saskatchewan Party that indexed the minimum wage to keep up with inflation in these last 10 years in this decade of growth. We've doubled the support for people with disabilities, doubled it. We transformed how the program works. They now have the SED program that's in place. We inherited a 440-person wait list of people with intellectual disabilities who are waiting on a group home space, the dignity of a place to live. Well, we eliminated that wait list, and now there are some in some regions that are on a list again because numbers have grown, but they are not at that level. They're not at 440 because we have seen a massive investment in group home spaces in the province. We've tripled the Seniors Income Assistance Program as well, and there's another file that we don't talk a lot about, but it's important to me. Our family grew up camping in our provincial parks. We have the best parks in the country, I think. Something I would say that very much needs to maintain the current balance of public and private mix that we see in those parks. We've increased investment in our provincial parks by 111% over this decade of growth. So there are any number of things on the list that I would point to. I would also say we as a government have made mistakes, and I have made mistakes. I think that's a natural course of action for individuals, for governments, for businesses, for any organization. And there is still work to do. We are off to a good start in terms of our 3-year plan to get the budget back to balance. We had a report from an informal report, not quite ready for first quarter, from the Minister of Finance during our planning meetings. And we are on track in this year's budget and in our long-term plan to get to a balance in 3 years. We're going to do so on the basis of and on the strength of better credit ratings than were here before this decade of growth. I think this is the right time for me to step aside. I do think the government will benefit and the province will benefit with a new voice and a new style, maybe some new energy. It's also time for me and for my family, perhaps to do something else. The party that has been very good to me is in good shape. You know, We still hold on to a small lead in the polls according to our last numbers. It would probably mean we might be successful in government or to form a government again, even after this budget. And we have strong resources in the party. We have a strong membership in the party. And we have a great team of women and men who are our MLAs that I want to thank. And I had a chance to do that late yesterday. People who are current members of caucus and those whom I have served with in the past. Great women and men that have, I guess, allowed me or accepted the fact that I receive a disproportionate credit for things that have gone well in the last 10 years, when we have really achieved them as a team and achieved them together. I have benefited, folks, from minds that are better than mine for guidance, hearts that are sometimes a little softer than mine so that we would stay in touch, and shoulders that are bigger than mine that I've stood on. I also want to thank we're going to have a few months together still, and lots of thank yous to be made to people and to the province of Saskatchewan in general. But let me just say very clearly how grateful I am to have had the chance to work with amazing senior advisors, the senior team of officials that I have. And think about how rare it is in this day and age to have one chief of staff last more than a year, never mind 10. Joe's been with me from the start. I've known Reg down since university. So it's been a great honor to be able to take this journey with him, and I don't think you'd find a stronger, more sound, strategic, political thinker in Canada than Reg, and so when you get to work with someone like that who's also one of your best friends, it's great. And Kathy Young she's now the Chief of Operations, but she has been my only DCOM, only Director of Communications. Donald Trump went through 2 in 48 hours, I think. She's been here for all 10 years, and there's others. There's Tim, there's Ed in Saskatoon. I don't want to go through a list because I'll miss some, but I'm very grateful to them for helping our not just me, but helping our family. They've been a great support to all of us. And I'm particularly grateful today for Tammy and for Megan and Coulter and Faith. Obviously they've put up with some stuff, but we've also benefited as a family from this opportunity. And so I want to say thanks to the people of the province for that. I'm very blessed to have a family like I do and parents like I do. And there's still work ahead and other thank yous and goodbyes, but I also want to say this. All of you, some of you who have been here longer than I was here, at least in an elected capacity, deserve thanks. Not just from our government, but the media deserve thanks from the province of Saskatchewan, from the people. You also have a very difficult job. And in this day and age, that might be sometimes a little bit more aggressive in terms of social media for those in politics. Same is true for all of you. I've seen it. I've seen what sometimes can be said of folks who are trying to simply report. And so I just want to thank you for the relationship that we've had and for the work that you do, and I'll try to answer any questions.
Is now the ideal time for you to go? I'm just curious about the timing, sir, because it wouldn't be ideal for you to want to have to let under the current debt situation and the current deficit. Can you offer some thoughts in terms of the things that you didn't sort of accomplish and why now, as opposed to maybe hang on till closer to the end, closer to 2020 election?
I think it's important to give the next person lots of time to identify, to become known by Saskatchewan people. The next premier, that woman or man, will need, I think, that time. I've been premier for a long time, and for good or for ill, that's the face of the party for many folks in the government. So I think that I wanted to leave enough time for that person. You know, we have debt that's tied to infrastructure and capital, and as you've heard me say over and over again, we also have operating debt, which even after these last number of budgets is still down from what we inherited. We also have a credit rating for the province that's better than when we started, still, after these last tough budgets. And we have the second lowest debt to GDP ratio in the country of all the provinces. Do I wish the budget was balanced? Yeah, of course. And we're going to get there. You're going to hear from the finance minister that our plan for our 3-year plan to get back to balance is on track. And that'll be very important for me. But I'll know when that happens that the plan started when I was still part of the team, and so I'll be grateful for that too.
You just I wonder the legacy and reputation that you'll be left with, given that you personally 10 years ago talked of how you had the shadow of Grant Devine, that you were conscious of what people said about the history of the Sask Party, where people came from that were involved. You paid down that big $1 billion government-owned debt. Do you not feel that some people, by you choosing now, will say everything we said about him was true? He's not left the province he's left it in a financial mess, just like Devine did.
Well, I for the reasons I just said, Sarah, I hope not, because I wouldn't agree with that description. We have the second lowest debt to GDP ratio in Canada. Our credit rating is higher now than what we took over from the NDP. We still have one of them, still a AAA credit rating. I don't think you get higher credit ratings if the finances are not strong. We've done all of this while undertaking historic tax reductions in the province. We've also paid down operating debt, and though the recent deficits we've had owing to low commodity prices have eaten into that a little bit, that operating debt's still lower. So that would be my response. Moreover, I would say this. You've been here a while too, Sarah, in this province. These questions that I mentioned off the top that we used to worry about a lot, I did. Folks in Saskatchewan wondered, would we ever get over 1 million people? Population growth is an important measure. If you can sustain growth quarter after quarter, you're going to give your economy a chance to survive, to maybe even thrive a little bit through down cycles in the commodity prices. And I think that's what we have seen. We have almost 1.2 million people now. Folks would have thought that impossible and said so. And I'm not saying the government should take credit for that, but we did have a growth plan, and we made specific changes to immigration policy, and we implemented a graduate retention plan. And so that is, I think, a lasting change that I'm proud to have played some small part in, that population change and the 60,000 plus more jobs that exist in the province than were here. So I need to answer those questions, but I think we have good answers.
Do you have a midlife question hanging over your head, given your relatively young age, the fact that you've joked what a political nerd you were in high school and university, that really the only job you ever wanted was this one. What do you do at your relatively young age when you achieve that goal for as long as you did, 10 years? Is like some giant question mark facing you, an unwritten book? What's left?
Well, I don't have immediate prospects, but there are some things that I'd be interested in doing that I'll keep my own counsel on those for now. Whatever happens, Tammy and what you do is very important, especially the job I've had, but there's other things that are more important, and we're in a very good spot there. So.
You retired from politics in Saskatchewan, I noticed. Why did you say in Saskatchewan?
I should have said anywhere. Yeah.
You've made mistakes over the last, you acknowledge you made mistakes, but when you look back at the last 10 years, which ones stand out to you?
Why do you guys want to talk about that? No, fair enough. Some that we changed, right? Some that we changed, made an adjustment to. Most of them, when we acknowledged the mistake made early on, I think we went a little too fast and with too much depth, perhaps, on some labor legislative changes. We still managed to make those changes we campaigned on, which I think also contribute to a better business climate for the province. But I think we went a little too quickly with some of those. In this last budget, the decision around libraries was a mistake, and we made those changes as well. I think you checked the record where we have said, look, this part, or I have said, look, I think we got this part wrong and we need to fix it. This has been over 10 years. I'd like to say we never stopped listening to the people of the province, me directly or our MLAs. And when we meet annually, like we just did in a planning session here in the outskirts of Regina, the MLAs will report certain things. They'll say, here's what I'm hearing, and sometimes they'll be hearing that the budget's unpopular, but we need to stick with this plan to get back to balance. And so there won't be a lot of changes there, but there are other things they brought forward where they're highlighting maybe some mistakes we've made, and you might be hearing from us, from me, even in the next number of weeks, about some further adjustments that we need to make. I think we're like anyone else, like a business or an individual or a family. You're going to make mistakes from time to time, and the importance is to acknowledge them. Some that others would consider mistakes, though, they're part of our growth plan, or part perhaps of our plan to get this budget back to balance, which I think is very important. So we may not be changing some of those things that others might view in that way.
Premier Wall, can you tell us, you talk about the population growth and the pride that you carry with that, but what are some of the other proud moments you have as Premier of this province since Saskatchewan has almost evolved so much over the last decade?
Well, it is a different place now because of what we talk about and what we don't talk about. We still have challenges that we face, and our government faces them, but they're not existential, but the near existential questions we used to ask about, will we ever grow and maintain that growth, those aren't asked anymore. That's something in general that I know, again, government's not directly responsible for, but I think we have a part in that. I'm proud that we were able to tell Saskatchewan's story around the world in a way that hasn't happened. I don't think it's ever happened. We have this amazing story to tell and products and resources to sell to the world, but we need to be in those regions where there is a current market and a growing market, and so we went to those regions. We increased funding to STEP, Trade Export Partnership, and then I went on trade missions. We've seen our exports to China increase dramatically. That's true across the region. We're to the point now where of all of India's Canadian imports, or all their things they buy from Canada, between 35% and 40% in any given year come from this province, Saskatchewan, with that increasing because we were able to open up the uranium market to India. So I think that's been important. That speaks to sort of long-term trade relationships that will sustain and create new jobs. If there's a smaller thing, I would say the group home spaces that we built for folks. What's the point of an economy growing and the government having some resources, as we were lucky to have over 10 years, if you don't reinvest them? So yeah, we reduced taxes, but our first tax reductions disproportionately and rightly benefited low-income people, and then we also took a significant amount of millions of dollars and built group home spaces for 440 folks with intellectual disabilities that wanted the dignity of a home but were on a wait list. Those are a couple things that maybe one on the more social side and one on the economy side. You know, that is also, we had that discussion. I would say, you know, when we would be talking, when I finally was talking to my senior team about when I wanted to maybe make this decision, and Tammy too, I said, well, there's things, there's staying till the end of that plan's implemented would be on the list. But, you know, whenever I realized, and I'm not sure which one of maybe it was Joe that told me, whenever you leave, there's going to be things that you wish you could have got to. So that better not be the reason you're deciding to stay or to go. And I really believe that Saskatchewan will benefit from a different style and a different voice, and so will our party. And so that kind of takes care of any of those considerations about, I wish I would have stuck around long enough for that. What's that?
Because your personal popularity has been relatively high until maybe the most recent poll has always exceeded your unpopularity. You've been seen as the face of the Sask party. Are you talking about a different philosophical direction? Do you think the party went too far to the right? Or?
No, I don't. I mean, whenever you undertake a budget like we did, people are going to say, well, they've moved to the right. But Premier Romano had to do some very difficult things in the budget. I don't think in the name of moving to the right or the left. He just needed to get those done. And they did them. So, but as for that question, Marie, I don't think that can. I don't think you can underestimate the impact and the possible and the positive power of a change in approach. Not that a different approach is needed or desired, but I think just if you're going to have a different individual, a different man or a different woman involved in this job, there's going to be a different perspective, and I think that will be very healthy. I think the foundation, the fundamentals of the party should stay the same. We should be a party that focuses on economic growth. That should be our North Star, this growth plan we have. But remembering that the point of economic growth is not for the sake of GDP stats and pie charts. It's so that we can have a quality of life in the province. So the government has a broader tax base from which we can reinvest in people, to invest in healthcare, social services. That's, I hope, what our Sask party is always. And so if that's center-right or... So I don't know what that is, but that's what I hope our party is, whoever the leader.
Liberal identity was established when the coalition was originally formed. 20 years ago, or is that sort of?
I hope we have a Sask Party identity, and I hope the leadership process reinforces that. And again, that identity is, yeah, we focus on growth, but the reason we want growth is for a quality of life that benefits everybody in the province.
Do you think you did enough?
Sorry, what's that?
Oh, I was just gonna ask a question.
One last one for Manny?
It's going to be, do you think you did enough on the Indigenous file over the 10 years? Specifically, the unemployment rate and the high school graduation rate have not improved substantially, marginally over 10 years.
There have been improvements, but I'd say that's fair, Manny, that there has not been enough progress that I would point to with, with satisfaction, or that there isn't more work that needs to be done. But we entered that joint task force with the FSIN a couple years ago to focus on education outcomes and increase graduation rates, and we're seeing great results. The last update of the growth plan, 2012, focused specifically on this issue of better completion rates for First Nations. We've also seen some modest improvement in the gap of Aboriginal unemployment versus general unemployment. And so I also think there are signs of progress. But I do think that there's more needed to be done. And I hope that the next leader takes the opportunity to update the growth plan again, as we did in 2011. And I think a big part of that has to be further engagement by all people in the economy, but by First Nations folks.
Thanks,
What do you
everybody.
hope that your legacy will be?
Let's go.